So in the previous video, we saw examples of how different atoms could come together to make either single, double, or triple bonds. All right, and we're going to have a little bit more practice in drawing molecules that have these, but I wanted to stop for a second and just give a little bit of information about like the differences in these types of bonds. All right. So one way of thinking about them is just simply the number of pairs of electrons that are being shared. All right, if you've got a single bond, you're sharing one pair of electrons. If it's double, it's two pairs. And if it's triple, it's three pairs. All right, but what does that mean in terms, how would that affect the actual connection between atoms? All right, one easy analogy that you can use for this that hopefully will make sense is to think about like if you took three identical weights, all right? So we got like, think of this like a block of lead, all right? And they're all the same, all right? And we've got the ceiling up here, and what we're gonna do is we're going to hang each of these blocks with a little slinky, like a little spring, all right? And if you can try to picture this, all right? Let's say that we hung it by one of those springs, all right? And it stretches it out this long. All right. Well, what would happen if you took another one of those springs and attached it? All right. Well, you now have more springs that are supporting the weight. All right. So since each spring is supporting a little bit less weight, it doesn't stretch quite as far. And it would hang maybe about this low. All right. And then what would happen if you took one more spring and you suspended it? All right. So the same type of analogy, if you think about like each spring as being a bond, all right, you can remember hopefully that if you do it with a single spring, that's like a single bond, it is going to be the longest of all of these types of bonds. All right, it's also going to be the weakest. All right, there's only one of these springs holding those together, so it would be easier to break this bond than it would, say, a triple bond. All right, by comparison, the triple bond is going to be the shortest. If you distribute that same weight with three bonds, it's not going to hang quite as low, so it's the shortest, but it's also the strongest. All right. And one way that that's going to affect us in nature has to do with something that's very common. All right. This molecule right here, which is two nitrogen atoms, which are connected by a triple bond. All right. The formula for that is N2. All right, because there's two of those nitrogen atoms. All right, this is the gas that makes up 80% of the Earth's atmosphere. All right, so if you go outside, or actually even if you're inside and you take a breath, all right, we know we breathe because we need oxygen. All right, oxygen's only about 16% of what we breathe in. About 80% of it is nitrogen. All right, so it's all around us. All right, the thing is, plants need nitrogen. All right, they need nitrogen to make proteins. That's the major thing that they need nitrogen for. But the thing is, most plants can't use this very abundant source of nitrogen for their nitrogen needs. All right, and the reason for that is that this bond right here is extremely hard to break. All right, and so how do plants get around this? All right, there are special microbes that some plants have as part of their roots. All right, and these microbes live in these little things. In fact, if you look at the biology of plants, if you were to pull them up, a lot of certain types of plants, especially what are called legumes, all right, which are your bean plants, are going to have these little nodules on their roots. All right, and the purpose of these nodules on their roots is that they contain little bits of bacteria that have the ability to break that nitrogen-nitrogen triple bond and turn it into a type of nitrogen that the plants can use. All right. So these play a really, really important role in biology, because if the plants can break down the nitrogen and turn it into molecules, and then we eat those plants that have that nitrogen, essentially this little thing on the roots of plants is the thing that eventually provides us the ability to use that nitrogen from the air and turn it into proteins that our body can use. Without that without these things right here, we couldn't do it, all right? And it gets back to the fact that that triple bond between the two nitrogen atoms is just a really tough bond to break, and you need a special organism to do it. All right, and if you remember back to biology class, there was a special term for that process. All right, that's what they mean by fixing nitrogen. All right, so the fixation of nitrogen is the breaking of that bond. All right, so getting back to drawing Lewis structures. All right, we're going to take the examples that we've learned so far. All right, making single bonds, double bonds, and triple bonds, and try applying it to a molecule where you might have a combination of these types of bonds. All right, so the thing about drawing Lewis structures is a lot of times it takes a little practice. All right, I highly recommend that if you're trying this to use a pencil. All right, because sometimes you put things together, it's just like putting a jigsaw piece puzzle together. You have to try some things, and sometimes they work, sometimes it doesn't work. All right, and a pencil is going to allow you to make mistakes, at least while you're getting used to this. All right, so the thing that you want to start off with, and the method that I use for this is to, let me adjust this. All right, so I've taken this formula right here. What this means is 1 carbon, 1 nitrogen, and 1 bromine. All right, and I've taken those atoms and I've drawn them all as their dot structures. All right, so I can see the dots arranged around them. All right, so the thing about this formula is it doesn't tell you the order that these are in. All right, does it go carbon, nitrogen, bromine? Perhaps the bromine is between the carbon and the nitrogen. All right, perhaps the carbon is in the middle. At first, you don't know the answer to that question. All right, we can use a little bit of strategy though. All right, so we know that bromine only has 1 sticky side. All right, so any type of molecule, at least for right now in the types of molecules we're drawing, any molecule that has only 1 sticky side is going to be on the outside. All right, there's no way that it could be in the middle, because to bond 2 atoms on the outside would require it to have 2 sticky sides. All right, so let's go ahead and try this at first, where we try putting things together where the nitrogen is in the middle. All right, and if we did that, we would eventually be making this intermediate structure right here. Notice that what we did was we made a bond between this electron and this electron of the bromine, and we made that bond with it. All right, that means that this bond, this electron, is no longer shown in the structure. Same thing between these 2 atoms. All right, these 2 electrons pair together to make this bond right here. All right, and so then on the carbon you have this, and this still remaining, which we show here. All right, well, let's look and see if are we done. All right, and right off the bat you can see we still have a lot of sides that have single electrons. All right, sticky sides. All right, so one thing that if you remember in the examples that we did before, is when you have those remaining sticky sides, you can bring them together to make an additional bond. All right, so let's look and see if we can do that here. I could maybe bring this guy together and this guy together, and that would end up making, this. All right, so we took these 2 electrons and we made an additional bond between the carbon and the nitrogen, which I've shown there. All right, but remember, we still have these electrons right here. All right, so these are, remember, these are 2 sticky sides. These aren't a pair. All right, that's why we were very careful about putting the 2 electrons as a pair on a side. All right, because we don't want to mistake a pair on a side with 2 separate single electrons, each on their own side. All right, so the thing is, once we get here, we've pretty much hit a dead end. All right, and unfortunately, when you're practicing this, you're going to run into cases where I can't make a molecule fitting those together. So we're going to have to back up and try something a little different. So let me just point out this guy right here is a dead end. All right, so let's try something a little different. All right, We could have, so again, we know that the bromine's on the outside, but what if we put this carbon between the nitrogen and the bromine? So again, we've laid out the pieces in a different order. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try to connect these guys with the bond and try to connect these guys right here with the bond. And so you can see in the resulting structure right here, again, we've made bonds between the sides that face each other, and then we're going to bring we're going to try to make another bond. All right, so we've got a sticky side right here and a sticky side right here, and those can come in to make an additional bond, and that would end up giving you this structure right here. And hopefully you notice we're still not done because we still have a sticky side right here and a sticky side right here. So what if we brought those in? And it really doesn't matter which side they're on. You know, if you've got that electron on that carbon, it might as well have been down at the bottom. And we can join those together, and that adds a third bond to that. And remember, draw in all of the things that are still there. So we've still got these lone pairs on the bromine. All right, we no longer have any sticky sides on the carbon or on the nitrogen, but you still have this lone pair up here. So don't forget to draw that in. All right, so that's a triple bond right there. All right, so this would be an acceptable structure. All right, and if you go through that checklist and you count all of the electrons here and all the electrons that are in this molecule right here, you have the same number. All right, if you start counting things, like if I drew a little circle around this, we have 2, 4, 6 from the triple bond plus the 2 more additional ones in this lone pair. That nitrogen has 8. All right, surrounding this carbon right here, we have 2, 4, 6, 8. All right, and around this bromine right here, we have 2 from this bond, 4, 6, 8. So all of the atoms are satisfying the octet rule. So this would be an acceptable structure for that. All right. This gets a lot easier. This gets a lot easier as you practice with making these structures, and we're going to do that in class soon.